All right, guys. So we're gonna kick off the analysis portion on the Hitbombs YouTube channel. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, and finally had some time to get around to this. And I thought a good one to start with would be the U.S. Open champion John Rahm. John has been on an absolute tear lately. Had that incident at the Memorial happen where he had a six-shot lead and caught COVID before the final round. Very unfortunate, but really cool to see his perseverance and do what he did at Torrey. In my opinion, one of the best golf swings out there. If I look at John's swing, I would say it's typically it's a little of a shorter golf swing, which has some benefits, but also has some downsides. We'll talk about that today. Um, but overall, I think it's a really good golf swing with some really important matchups that I think you guys might find interesting. All right, so we'll start with the setup. I think John has a tremendous setup. The first thing I'm kind of looking at is the symmetry. So you see the left shoulder aligned over the left hip. That allows him to have a little bit of shoulder tilt. And ultimately, in my opinion, we want that relationship because his right hand is a little lower than a left. So naturally, that right shoulder being lower should put that spine in just a little bit of a side tilt that way, okay? Which makes sense because, like I said, our right hand is lower than our left. So I like that a lot. If you look at John's feet, okay, we'll start with the right one. You'll see that it's a lot straighter than most, and then he has a little flare on the left. In my opinion, I think that there is a point of diminishing returns with foot flare. So I think where he has it is pretty biomechanically advantageous, we'll say, and really forces you to load that trail hip correctly. Now, that is not recommended for everyone, okay? Especially if you have range of motion issues, you're in the older demographic. Wouldn't recommend it for everyone, but if you can do it, it could be a good thing for sure. John's grip is on the weaker side, okay? So you'll see a very, very weak left hand, okay? Barely seeing any of that first knuckle, and then that V kind of points up in the right shoulder vicinity. I do apologize, this video is a little blurry. And also, I do want to give a shout out to Sacred Links Photography on Instagram. We'll have them tagged. Thank you for allowing us to use these videos. But back to the grip, a little on the weaker side. So typically, weaker grips are more correlated to open club face tendencies. So typically, a weaker grip is going to have to make some type of adjustment in the swing to actually square that face up, and we're going to talk about that in this analysis. If you look at the down the line view, and we draw a line from the feet up, okay, right around the balls, you can see that line touches just on the front of the kneecaps and then hits right under the armpits, okay? So that lets us know that he's somewhat balanced at address. We could maybe assume that, he's got a pretty athletic setup under the balls of his feet, gives him a good place to move from. Also, I like how John is pretty neutral from the tailbone up to the lumbar spine, and then he gets a little rounded through the upper back, which is good. You don't want to be too rigid up there. It will lock the spine up from rotating. And then lastly, a couple things I really like I like the fact that his humerus is hanging approximately 88 degrees. That lets me know that his shoulders are somewhat hanging natural with gravity. And that relationship will give us a little bit of space between the hands and the torso at address. Now, that's very important for rotational purposes. Your body will not rotate if it does not have space to move. So, in my opinion, I think that's a very good thing to have, and overall a great setup. Now, one thing to note, these videos are moving, so we'll do the best we can. They weren't taken from a tripod, which is perfectly fine. The one on the left is John from the U.S. Open this last weekend. The one on the right is from, I think, 2019 or 2020. I thought it was a pretty good face on. A little blurry, slightly blurry, but overall, it really is a great angle and a great view. So we'll start with the face on view, okay? So one of the things I like to see, okay, and I see this from great players, and John does this really well, is you'll see a little counter movement forward to start to swing, and what that does is that will actually start to press the hands forward, okay? So we see a little bit of a forward press there, and then as he's doing that, he's simultaneously starting to get his body moving to the right, okay? So you can see how he starts to get hands go forward, body starts to move to the right. In my opinion, that's a very important sequence, and you see that in a lot of the very elite movers. I would put Rory into that category. I would put Dustin into that category. I would put Jamie Sedlowski, Kyle Berkshire, John Rahm. I believe Tiger has some of that in there. So that sequence of getting the body to move to the right, in my opinion, starts to create a little bit of momentum. Okay, so it gets energy into the system very early. Okay, and also with John, okay, we mentioned he has a weaker grip. Okay, so what that's doing is that's actually starting the process of going, okay, from more of a extended or slightly cupped wrist, okay, to a flat wrist. So you can see how he took that cup, and as he triggered, he essentially triggered it out. Okay, so that's given him a head start on getting that wrist to bow a little bit. Okay, I believe Dustin does it the same way. He gets a head start on it. In my opinion, to have as much bow as Dustin has at the top, you have to have that in there. Okay. So now, as he goes to the top, the other thing I really like is I like a very nice wide takeaway that he has. Okay, so you can see that when he reaches club shaft parallel in the backswing, give or take, there's a decent amount of space between his hands and his right hip. Okay, so that tells us that the rates of wrist hinge or radial deviation is happening at a very slow rate. In my opinion, this helps him turn his body pretty efficiently. Continues to move up into the backswing. Once again, P3, you can see that club relationship to the left arm relationship, 117 or 18 degrees. So it's very wide. Much prefer that myself. Continues to go to the top. Now, the interesting thing about this is John does not have a huge shoulder turn. Okay, I would say it's definitely on the shorter side of golf swings. Is that my preference? No, but at the same time, John just won the U.S. Open last week, so there are definitely things that we can learn from that. Now, as he continues to go to the top, he gets a little bit of load. Okay, so you can kind of see there was a little bit of wrist hinge in there, which is fine. I like it happening right at the last second. Okay, now what you'll see when he gets to the top, okay, and it's very close, but essentially his right hip is starting to move back to the point of where it started. Okay, so at address, you can see John's between that line. He moves to the right, and actually, if we redraw that, let me redraw that to make sure I did not miss that for a second. So we'll put it right on the outside of his pant leg, right there. Okay, put a line just on the outside of his head. Okay, now as he goes to the right, you'll see he kind of blows through that line. It stays through that line. Okay, so we can still see that right side of his pant, and then at the top, what happens is now, because of rotation and the body moving correctly, that right hip has returned back in between those lines. So you can see just a small gap, if anything. Now, the interesting thing is, and I don't think a lot of people notice this, but if you actually look at John's left foot, he's actually allowing the heel to come up, right? Which is interesting because he's got a very short backswing. But that heel is coming up. I think a lot of people are pretty afraid to do that. We'll talk more about that as it gets to the transition. But we do have a heel that's moving up in the backswing. Rory does it as well. In my opinion, I think that, I do think there's a lot of advantages to having the left heel come up. I don't think that everyone has to lift it like a long driver necessarily, especially if you're playing competitive golf. But at the same time, you can. Bubba Watson's a great example of that. But I do think there is a lot of advantages to allowing it to come up, even if it's just a little bit. It allows the sequencing and motion to kind of correct itself in a way. All right, down the line view. Okay, now this camera is definitely moving, so we probably won't draw many lines. But one of the first things you'll see is you're going to see that John's club head starts to go out a little bit. That might be slightly off. Nope, pretty good. So it starts to go out, and as that happens, you can see John's hands are also following that. So hands are going out. We know that from the face-on view, he's got a very wide takeaway, okay? And the combination of the hands going out, okay, with very little wrist set and that lead wrist going into a flex position, as we can see right there. So we see that relationship of that lead form to that wrist in a flex position. So two things that happen from that is, one, that starts to close the face down ever so slightly. Okay, so you can see that club face is very square or almost parallel to the spine, give or take. And then also what's starting to happen is because the hands are going out with that left wrist flex, the club head is starting to swing a little bit inside his hands. Okay, so we backed it up. You can see how it's slightly inside the hands. Now, those hands continue to work up in the backswing. Okay, at left arm parallel P3, the hands are pretty much in the center, maybe even more towards the ball, almost over the left pec. So I'd say it's more of an outside backswing for sure. Okay, now what that does is the more the hands move vertically in the backswing, okay, with a lead wrist in a flex position and the club not loading, typically what that's going to do is that's going to start to lay the pitch of the shaft off in a shallow position. Now, we have to remember there's always parallax there when we're looking at swings in 2D, right? The camera is low, so that might look a little shallower than what it actually is. But we do know that as he gets to the top, okay, left arm is well above the shoulder line, okay? Now, the thing about this, okay, so with the length of John's backswing, in my opinion, okay, the club has to be somewhat on that side of the line. So you can see that he's obviously on that side of the line. Just meant to use an arrow there. And we could call it more of a shallow shaft as with a lead wrist that is pretty severely flexed, right? So you can see that lead wrist is flexed. Remember what I said in the beginning. If you're going to have a weak grip, you have to do something to square that face up. And what John does is he actually bows that lead wrist, okay? Now, in my opinion, this is where John does a great job given how short his golf swing is, okay? And really all of it's been good up to this point, but I think that he does a great job managing this. Typically with a shorter backswing, you don't have as much time, okay? So you don't have time to really, waste. The other thing too is you see his right leg start with a little bit of flex. He goes to the top, okay? Maybe loses a little bit, but it's not straight and overly hard, okay? As he gets into the downswing, now we see that right leg reflex to the point where when he gets to left arm parallel, okay, and we'll kind of sync both of these up, okay, give or take, and we're missing a frame there, so we'll go slightly higher. But you can see at that point, John's knees have pretty much squared up, okay, give or take. Right heel is still on the ground, but overall, really, really, really good. Typically at left arm parallel, I like to see those knees square. Maybe preferably, I would prefer to see the right heel just a little bit off the ground. But overall, like I said, that's just a preference. Doesn't mean that everyone has to do it. And then the other thing too is as we're watching this and he gets to the top, right, you'll see that left hip start to pretty much stay for the most part over the left heel. Okay, so if we draw a line on the left heel at the top, sorry, on the outside of the left heel, you'll see that left hip maybe moves forward just a little bit, but it really does a good job of not going past it. Okay, so when we see that lower body have the rotation it does, typically we do see that left hip staying, over the left heel. Typically, if you see the pelvis sliding pretty far laterally, you won't see much rotation in the pelvis. So you can see that John does a great job of that. And then as this gets down to impact, you can see the shaft is coming in very shallow, right? In my opinion, that's a byproduct of, one, he had the club in a pretty good position at the top. So it wasn't, for how short the backswing was, it wasn't across the line. And the lead wrist was flexed, which allowed him to basically turn and rotate on it. So you can see the club shaft coming down through the forearm. Take note of that lead wrist still in a flexed state, continues to move down. A lot of body rotation there. You can see that left hip. We'll get the face-on view matched up. Okay. The other thing too is that I love with John is as he gets down there, you can see how much bend he has in that right arm. Okay. So if the body was not rotating, that would be straightening. So in my opinion, there is a direct correlation between how his body is rotating and that right elbow maintaining its flex. Okay, tremendous body rotation from the down the line view. And then a pretty stable release, right? So you see that maybe a little bit of roll, but overall pretty stable coming out and exiting through the left shoulder. And then from the face-on view, see that lead wrist in a flex state, and then it continues to move well into the finish. Now, the interesting thing about John's swing from the face-on view, okay, which I'm actually going to go back to the backswing. I want to point one thing out. So, one of the things that you see a lot we'll use Jamie Sidlowski, Rory does it, Dustin has a little bit in there, is if we look at this left heel move, okay, so typically if we put a line on that inside of that left heel, okay, as that club goes to the top, what you'll see a lot of players do is that heel will actually land towards the target, okay? Now, the interesting thing with John, and I'm going to blow this up for us to look at a little closer, okay, is his actually does the opposite, okay? So what we're looking at is if we have a reference of where that left heel starts, okay, and he goes to the top, you can see that that left heel actually starts to replant back, okay? Now, in my opinion, that's due to it could be related to a couple of things, but typically what you would want to see through the transition is that left heel actually moving in the opposite direction, okay? So you'd want to see that heel actually landing a little bit forward. And the thing that does is that puts the left hip in a position to then utilize the ground really efficiently, okay? So not saying that John does not use the ground efficiently at all, so please don't even go there. But one of the things that you'll typically see is when guys' left heel actually starts to land more towards the target, okay, you'll typically see them push off the ground in a manner of which they will then see the left foot kind of get unweighted or will start to fly. So Bubba Watson is a great example of that. Patrick Reed does that as well. Obviously, you don't have to do this to win golf tournaments. I'm just pointing things out. You know, I think it's to me more interesting to see how different guys get it done different ways. You know, John has a lot of great things in his golf swing. But at the end of the day, it's about making sure that you know a good percentage of your swing has the appropriate matchups. So obviously, you know, I would take his career and bank account any day. But really good stuff from John. Once again, I just want to thank Sacred Links for allowing me to use these swings. If you guys have not checked out my website, hitbombs.com, be sure to do that. We got a bunch of we got a video content on there, online lessons, and then we also got some of my own personal workouts that I have from my trainer on there. If you guys want to check that out and begin the journey of hitting some bombs. So other than that, if you guys have not yet subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That will alert you every time we release new content. And if you guys can, give this video a thumbs up. Helps us know that you guys liked it, so we'll keep doing more of these things. And other than that, we'll see you next time. Have a great day. Peace out.